Welcome to the Maliheh Paryavi podcast. I'm your host, Maliheh Paryavi. This season, I bring you real conversations with inspiring women leaders who are norm breakers and pioneers. Join my guests and I as we explore how to realize our dreams, become the leaders we deserve to be, and transform the world both within and around us. Our journey together begins right now. I'm in Portland, Maine, and so excited to be visiting Dr. Christiane Northrup, who is a visionary pioneer and world-renowned authority on women's health and wellness. Dr. Northrup, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love your international work with women and leadership, and this is where I have gone, I think, is the next step.
Yes, I totally agree with you, but I want to back up a little bit and share a little bit about my story and what's led me here.
Beautiful.
I confess I spent much of my 20s going in and out of doctors' offices and hospitals. And unfortunately, the doctors who I placed so much of my trust in kept failing me over and over and over again. And I didn't realize it at the time, but they were just focused on treating my symptoms. No one was really looking at me as a whole person and trying to help me identify the root causes so that I could actually heal. And I kept asking questions, but no one seemed to have any answers. And I was getting really frustrated and my health kept deteriorating. And here I was, a newly minted Harvard PhD with no energy to put it to use.
Wow.
Yeah, and I finally got so disappointed and so frustrated that I decided to take matters into my own hands. I mean, I'm trained as an economist, but I put my researcher hat on and I started, and I started educating myself on all the possible factors that could be contributing to my health challenges, from my nutrition to my daily habits to my sleep and exercise and my hydration, my thoughts, my beliefs, my relationship with God, my relationship with myself, with my body, my other relationships in my life, my career, and even the self-care products and beauty products I was using. Like, I literally went through anything I could think of and try to make some sort of a linkage or understand how this could be affecting my body and my health.
Right.
Slowly, a picture was emerging. And I wasn't really working on a lot of these things at the time, but I don't think I was doing it in a way that truly honored my body and myself, and my body just wasn't having it anymore because it was just being pushed around way too much.
That's right, yes.
I realized that all this time, my body was trying to speak to me, and I just didn't know how to listen. I didn't know how to tune in. And each time it had to go to a new extreme to get my attention. And thankfully, I started to listen before things got super bad. And, I'm about to turn 35 now. And while it has been a process, I can honestly say I've never felt better in my own skin, in my body, as a person, as a woman. I just feel so grateful for the growth and the journey. I've learned that, at least for me, being healthy requires a mind, body, spiritual, and emotional approach, which I find very empowering.
Yes. Yes.
And I talk a lot on this podcast about how we can internally empower ourselves to live our best lives. And I believe this also applies to our physical health and overall wellness. And in fact, for decades, you have been a pioneer and a practitioner of what you call the medicine of empowerment.
Yes.
And you say in your book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, which, by the way, I feel should be required reading for any woman out there. The secret to thriving is the knowledge that we are never simply victims of our bodies. We have within us the ability to heal from anything and go on to live joy-filled lives. So, Dr. Northrup, does that mean that regardless of our individual circumstances, regardless of our past and histories and our age, each of us has the power to create vibrant health for ourselves, like literally right now?
Well, it is, yes, we have the power. There's a few things, though. One, the soul curriculum you chose before being born. And I'm going to be very straightforward about this. I couldn't talk about this sort of thing for many, many years. I would sort of skirt around it. But one-on-one with my patients in a room with the door closed, I could always ask them, okay, what's really going on. Just tell me what's going on in your life. I would just start there. What's going on in your life? And then we could peel back the layers. I remember one woman in particular who had just recovered from breast cancer treatment. And I said to her, well, it's really no wonder if we look at the traumas in your life leading up to that, the divorce, the betrayal by another family member, and all of this. And then when she left, she was so pleased to realize, wait a minute. Number one, I didn't do anything wrong coming from what I knew from my family. I did nothing wrong. And of course, my body would react in this way. So now that I know that I have this power, I'm going to live my life on purpose. She became a teacher of a certain kind of writing process called proprioceptive writing, where she taught others how to tune into their inner wisdom through this particular practice. And I've since learned that sometimes, let's take a child, right? If you have a child who gets leukemia or a sarcoma or something, that's not the child's lifestyle. That has to be a soul agreement. And if you've been around in a children's hospital ever and you see these little Buddhas, any child who's sick before the age of 7 is generally some kind of spiritual teacher for the family. And that's a big concept that's never talked about in medicine, except maybe behind closed doors. But even that said, I've seen so many miracles. We have data that shows that there's at least one case of spontaneous remission from every known disease, including ALS and the ones that we consider progressive and fatal. A book called Radical Remission, Kelly Turner. And she, for her PhD, wanted to study what the people who had experienced spontaneous remission actually did. So she went on PubMed and she found all these documented in the medical literature. And then she tracked down a bunch of them, enough to get her numbers appropriate for statistics, and asked what they had done. And in each case, there was generally a spiritual component, a nutritional component, a body movement component. And so those are the sorts of things that obviously you came to in your own life. And it's a tragedy, really, that Western medicine still sees the body in an obsolete form, like a machine, a Newtonian cause and effect. Your body is a machine. And therefore, if it isn't working, push it harder or find the missing drug, as though a drug ever really cured anything. I mean, at this point in time in the United States, every person age 65 and over is on a minimum of 6 prescription drugs.
Wow.
Now, that's on average, which means that you've got a bunch of people having way more than that. And then you have some people taking none at all. My mother is 94, not a single prescription drug. Yeah. So it's a belief system. If you watch television, what do we have on television in the United States? I think we're the only civilized country that allows drug ads. Ask your doctor about whatever, and then they list all the effects. They're not side effects, they're effects. I just had on my radio show this morning Dr. Jeffrey Fidel, who's a specialist in MRIs, who was diagnosed with bipolar disease in medical school, I think. And he told me the 5 psychiatric drugs all at the same time. It was stunning how he got off them. But as we talked about it, and the effects of all of these, Lomictal and Depakote and on and on and on. And he said none of which is native to the human body.
And then you have to take new drugs to counter the effects of those drugs.
Yeah. He said there's even now, and so he just recently reviewed the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Manual for Mental Disorders. He said there's a new one, which is medication-caused bipolar.
Wow.
I mean, so to be well, we almost just have to step out of that world. That world is very good. If you're hit by a car or if you need a new knee, it's wonderful. Wonderful. But the mindset driving it is an obsolete mindset. They need to catch up with science. And that is that we live in a quantum universe where every thought we think affects our biochemistry. And so we can change our thoughts. We can change our beliefs. Dr. Joe Dispenza is a buddy of mine, and he wrote Making the Mind Matter, meaning literally changing your mind and having it change your body. And Joe was hit by an SUV when he was in a triathlon. A police waved it through and it hit him. And he was told, you'll never walk again. He was paralyzed. He needed a Harrington rod fusion. And he said, no, I'm going to trust that the energy that created my body is still working. And I'm going to just trust that. But he said to do it, this is the key. He had to get out of fear, anger, despair, depression, and get into the attitude of gratitude, which sounds, we make this in all the movies. It's so Pollyanna. Oh, you idiot. How many movies have you watched, right? Where the person is going down the road listening to affirmations. And the movie script makes that person seem like the stupidest fool on the planet. Well, that's what the ego does with this information. The ego's fighting for its life at all times. I'm in control, and this drug is going to heal me. And you stupid fool, that's not how it is. When in fact, you know from your own journey, and I certainly know from my own journey, that the body has this infinite capacity to heal, but it will not heal. It cannot heal in a state of chronic stress, chronic adrenaline, cortisol, the stress hormones, which raise insulin levels, cause cellular inflammation. Cellular inflammation is the root cause of all the most common chronic degenerative diseases, cancer, diabetes, even Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. Which is from cellular inflammation, blood sugar too high, vitamin D levels too low, not enough nitric oxide. In other words, there's biochemistry to support everything I'm saying, but it begins almost with this, a surrender. Almost. I'll tell you a story from my own life. I was beginning to write the book Mother-Daughter Wisdom, which took me about 8 years to write. And I wear contact lenses, and I was writing down everything about my mother that hadn't worked very well for me, because it's part of my writing process. Just get it all down. You're going to edit it later. It'll never see the light of day, but get the emotions out on the paper. And I started to have this feeling of something underneath my lens, and I cleaned it and cleaned it and cleaned it. Went to New York to do some financial seminar, kept the thing in. By the time I got home, I woke up in the morning with a clouded cornea on my left side. So I always do things symbolically. Left side, right hemisphere. Left eye goes to the right hemisphere, which is where your intuition is. It's where music is. It's where symbols are. So I knew that somehow my right hemisphere, I needed to listen to that. But I also knew the eyes are in the liver meridian. They're about anger. So I went to the top cornea specialist at Massachusetts Eye and Ear after going here in Portland to 4 different doctors, and they'd bring in all the other doctors to look. No one knew what it was, and they said how fascinating it was. And meanwhile, the eye is getting more and more clouded. So I go down to the head of the cornea unit at Mass General, Mass Eye and Ear, and he does a corneal biopsy, and he says, you have, we think, infectious crystalline keratopathy, which we have 80 known cases in the world literature, and they're all in people who are on immunosuppressive drugs. So he started to give me antibiotics, very special ones, and you put them in the eye every single hour. I had to wake myself up to put these drops in my eye every single hour until I knew that the waking up itself was causing so many stress hormones that my body could never heal any germ. So I said that to him. I said, this is the old argument between Louis Pasteur and Antoine Beauchamp. And on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur said, Beauchamp was right. It's the environment, not the germ. So I said to this guy, I'm creating an environment. He said, well, germs grow all the time. I said, yeah, but if I'm creating a stressful environment, then the drugs will never have a chance to work. Next morning I get up, it's cloudier still. I got down on my knees and I said, help me. just help me. God, my inner wisdom, divine love, you get to name yourself. And what came to me from my own intuition was a lecture I had heard from a guy named Richard Cathcart, who invented a total hip, and it was on the wonders of high-dose vitamin C. Now think of it, because God also has a sense of humor. Vitamin C, S-E-E. I began taking massive doses because I know it's a good reducing agent, like 50 grams by mouth. I have that kind of iron stomach. And the next morning, I woke up and my cornea was clear.
Wow.
Yeah. So that story has everything. Has my anger with my mother. It's not adult anger. That's a childhood anger. So I was dealing with the wounded inner child that had to be grown up. You got to grow her up. So how do you grow her up? Write a book called Mother-Daughter Wisdom. Okay. Then I also went to the best eye person that I could possibly find. Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary. Wonderful. Loved the guy. Had a biopsy. Did all that. But ultimately, the healing did not come from everything they had to offer. If I had just followed what they said, I would be blind in my left eye. Now, later, I found out that everyone goes blind in the left eye who has this, but I do not Google illnesses, and I don't think anyone should. So I didn't know that. I didn't know that what I had was not curable. So therefore, I got better.
That's amazing. And you trusted your inner guide you really tapped into that to get that wisdom and to get that advice. But some people may not have the medical training that you have.
No, they don't. Yeah. That is very true. So what do you do then, right? Because it's true. I have this massive toolbox of things that I have known would work. But I've also seen so many people get better just using their mind alone. Affirmations, just cleaning up their diet, getting rid of all junk food, stopping alcohol.
Sugar.
Sugar is a biggie. It's a biggie. And I know you're Persian, so do you have that wonderful Persian rice? That's the best stuff on the planet. And stuff with roses. It's so good. So you just do that sometimes, right? Sometimes. But if you're doing a healing thing, Anthony William is from Maine, and Anthony's a friend of mine, and he's helped so many people just having them follow a raw vegan diet. I don't follow a raw vegan diet, but I have. I'll do 21 days here and there, or an Ayurvedic cleanse, or whatever. But here's what happens, because people are so individual. The right thing will come to them as an intuition, as Oprah called me one day back when she had her show, and I literally got a call from Oprah. Hello, this is Oprah. And what had happened was the book, The Wisdom of Menopause, had literally fallen off her shelf and opened to the page about heart palpitations, which she was having going through perimenopause. And that's why she called me and had me on the show.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like that. If you're open, but you have to be open, and you have to, let me give you another example of being open. So one day back in the 80s, late 80s, maybe. Yeah, late 80s. I was feeling that there was something more for me to do in my career, but I didn't know what. And I stood at my bedside table, and using the work of Florence Scovel Shinn, who wrote a little book called The Game of Life and How to Play It, I said a thing out loud. Infinite Spirit, give me a sign. Show me the next best use of my gifts and talents. Like, give me a sign then. And make it so obvious that I can't ignore it. Okay, it's 11 in the morning on a Friday. 2 in the afternoon, a literary agent calls me and says, I think it's time you wrote a book. And that was Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom.
Wow.
Yeah, I never intended to write a book. I didn't even intend to be a doctor. So that's how it is. Oh, one of the breadcrumbs that you follow, and women will really, I think, resonate, is what makes you weep, what makes you cry, what moves you to tears. But tears of, it's a sort of pain-filled joy, joy-filled pain. Tererai Trent, who's from Zimbabwe, wrote a great book called The Awakened Woman, and I adore her story. She was 14, married for the bride price of a cow, 4 children by the age of 18, eventually got to the United States, and got a PhD, which is a miracle, a miracle. So here's what she says to women if they want to find their purpose, because when you find your purpose, things click into place with your body. And she says, tell me what breaks your heart. Tell me what breaks your heart. And then from that, you find your calling, because your broken heart will be healed by doing something, anything. So she had a woman in one of her trainings whose heart was broken by all the Syrian refugees. So she started to just work with the ones in her local community. And it's changed her life in the most wonderful way possible. So if homelessness breaks your heart, if racial tension breaks your heart, in my case, I saw a baby born in med school and I started to weep. I was so glad we had masks. So, that because back then, a woman was weak and she was taking the place of a man. And so I, felt that I'd never seen anything more beautiful. It was a transcendent moment. The nurse was yelling at the medical student for letting go of the umbilical cord. And I thought, how could you be yelling at a holy moment like this? This is the most beautiful, sacred thing I've ever seen. That's why I went into OBGYN.
And what you're describing is really, I talked to Susan David in one of the episodes about having emotional agility and really connecting with our emotions, and that they're really information.
Yes.
And so many of us feel so disconnected with our emotions that if you ask someone what makes you weep, they won't be able to tell you because they're just trying so hard not to feel that or not to face that.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. But here's the thing. If you allow yourself to go there, many women will say, if I allow myself to go there, I will never come out of it. I will go into a pit so deep that I'll never come out. It's never true. In fact, if
it's
you
the
allow,
key to healing.
That's right. If you allow yourself to go there, really all the way in a safe place, maybe with someone who just sits there and hands you tissues. If you go all the way in, what often happens when you go down to the bottom of that, you come out laughing. I've seen that many times. I remember I was at an Ann Wilson Schaaf workshop, Living in Process, and we went there because I thought one of my colleagues was an alcoholic. So this was when I was in a practice with 4 women. And we thought one of them was an alcoholic, but we didn't know for sure. So we went out to do an intervention, which is what you do with anyone who has an addiction, and the steps of an intervention. You tell them how much you love them. You tell them what their addiction is doing to you. And then 3, you lower the boom and say, if this doesn't stop, these are the consequences. Well, we're waiting for 8 days while people are going through their healing process of their addictions. And then finally, on like the last day, Ann Schaaf gets us all in a circle, the partners, and begins to ask us to tell our partner how we feel about her problem. And I start to tell her how moved I was when she parked my car when I was in labor with my second daughter. Back then, women were not helping women very much. They are now. The sisterhood is, here we are, right? But the sisterhood is like alive and well now in a way that it never was like 30 years ago. And Ann Schaaf looks at me. I'm crying. And I start to cry and I start to get down on the mat to have that process. And then I, choked it back because I was really good at that. That's what surgical training does for you. You keep going. Well, that's what any soldier will tell you. When you're going through hell, keep going. So I sit up and I say, no, okay, I'm good. I just tamped it all down. I'm good. Anne looks at me. So this is an older woman, a mentor, right? And she looks at me and she goes, you are so tired. Ugh, I lost it. I wept. I made those sounds. I think they're called a ululation, that you make at the Wailing Wall, or Terai talks about these ancient sounds of women, of grieving or celebration. I was down on the mat for an hour and the whole room was popping. Everybody, because when you go to that primal place, it affects everybody. But I had a witness self at the same time saying, oh, this is why you went into women's health. I went and I felt the pain of my mother who never rested, my grandmother who could never rest, and then opened this trap door and went down into the place of women's pain. And it was endless. Women's pain is endless in patriarchy. But when I finally came back, I said, oh, I know why I'm here. To take this pain and transform it into joy. The felt experience in my body. So if you allow yourself to go there and then go all the way in and come all the way out, you're going to know something that you didn't know on the way in.
The key in that is really trusting those emotions and also trusting our bodies when they are manifesting certain emotions, because I think we spend so much of our time fighting our bodies and resisting our bodies instead of really believing that our body's natural state of being is health. It wants to have energy. It wants to be vibrant. It wants to be healthy and in balance. And we're the ones throwing it off balance through our thoughts and behaviors and our environments. And this isn't to put blame on us, but it's empowering to realize that our actions can cultivate our health, can impact our health, and really trusting the wisdom of our bodies, because our body knows how to get to that state of health, and our emotions also know how to get us to what we are meant to do, and they often work together.
Very much so. But very often what we're doing as adults is we're having to grow up an immature part of us. I think about the kids being raised today, and they have music lessons, hockey practice. They have to learn French, obviously. And they are scheduled from the moment they get up till the moment they go to bed. There's no time for being. There's no time to be children, much after the age of kindergarten, because of this ego-driven, I've got to get my 5-year-old into Harvard someday. And so what happens to many, many people is they've been taught, do this so we will love you. You will get accolades, you will get attention, you will get the nourishment we all need, but only by doing this. What Carl Jung said, the biggest burden you can ever put on a child is the unrealized dreams of his or her parents. So that's what some of the healing is about. You literally have this immature part of yourself. One of the exercises I use a lot with people, I learned from Dr. Doris E. Cohen, the 7 Steps of Joy. And here's what you do. You're having an issue. You just pick a number from 1 to 10. Okay, you got the number. It's 7. Very often it's 7. And that's the age of the child who is running your endocrine system, your central nervous system, and your immune system, that unhealed part. So then you just go into this magic garden every day for 40 days, visit her, grow her up, tell her, I'm not leaving you again. I am taking my leave. We're not taking teddy bear to work here, but I'll be back. Takes about 2 minutes a day. And you can heal yourself by visiting the part of you that's sort of stuck in time, because that part never got a chance to truly experience the emotion, to be as angry as they were, to be as sad as they were, or they were judged. So many children are judged for having an emotion. You're a bad boy. You're a bad girl for, hitting your sister or whatever. You can say to a kid, I love, you're fine. This behavior, not okay. We've had that all kind of bound together. So, and, this is the work about shame. Guilt says I made a mistake. Shame says I am a mistake. Brene Brown's work. So, and shame is the most painful emotion known to humanity. I am a mistake. So we each have to do that, that work.
All of this is really about cultivating a loving relationship with ourselves and
yes.
Loving and accepting ourselves and the thoughts that go in our minds on a daily basis and how we speak to ourselves. Could you talk a little bit about the science behind how our thoughts affect our bodies and how choosing kind thoughts and loving thoughts really can be radical in terms of changing our health?
It really can. And we know from the work of Masaru Emoto, Messages in Water, the late Japanese researcher, that when he would take water and even put the word love on the container or direct love toward the water, then he had a very special way that he would freeze the crystals in a sub-zero way. And the crystals where there was love in imprinting the water, the energy of the water, the crystals are beautiful. Where there's hatred with the water, fear, anything like that, then there's the crystalline pattern is this. Ugh. So our bodies are 70% water, which means that the way you talk to yourself changes the structure of the water in your body. One of Louise Hay's classic Louise Hay is you look in a mirror every day for 30 days. You look right into your eyes. You go, I love you. I really love you. Now, at first, when you start to do it, you're going to get a committee. They're like all on a bus, all your critics. You stupid fool. What are you doing? This is really dumb. And you just say, thank you for sharing. And then you keep doing it. And you used to write it on a prescription pad. I accept myself unconditionally right now, and have people tape it to their bathroom mirror and say it out loud in the morning and at night. And after about 30 days, your soul's looking out at you saying, yep, it's the truth. That is powerful. You do it or do it in a mirror. Classic Louise Hay mirror work. And it has healed so many things. That alone, because the energy of gratitude and love has been studied at the Institute of Heart Math. And they find that when you're in a state of gratitude, it changes the beat-to-beat variability of the heart, what's known as cardiac coherence. So instead of it being all over the place, it's got this nice coherence. Then the heart is actually the big endocrine organ of the body. The heart rules everything. We think it's the mind. But if you get into gratitude and you get into love, you start changing your hormones. So you produce way more DHEA, which is a hormone made by the adrenal glands. And that's the mother hormone that changes the levels of all the sex steroid hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. So DHEA is the mother hormone. You start with that. And so many women are in adrenal burnout, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, Sjogren's syndrome, Lyme disease. It's all the same. But once you get into the state of gratitude, and if you can stay there for whatever, 7 minutes, anything, even if you and I sit here and we think about a kitten or a puppy, that where you look at pictures, let's say on Instagram, right? So you're the Instagram kittens or the funny dogs or whatever. When you do that, it gives you beat to beat variability of your heart rate. It gives you cardiac coherence, and that begins to reset the whole body. And that's amazing, right? And we know that a dog in the waiting room of a doctor's office lowers everyone's blood pressure. So does a fish tank. We've had these studies forever. They need to be actually put into place, right? Yeah.
So I tried this practice about the prescription you would write. I actually saw a clip of you in the documentary Hungry for Change.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
That is how I got introduced to that practice, through you. And I remember the first time I put it up, I was like, I love and accept myself unconditionally right now. I was like, that felt really true for me, and I felt really grateful.
Yes.
I think I had to break it down, and I think what I was struggling with was loving and accepting my body unconditionally. And
oh, that's good.
Yeah, and so when I said that, it's like, no, you don't. How can you?
Yes.
I mean, look at yourself. Like,
how about, like we all do.
Yeah. And I couldn't believe the things I was saying to myself. I mean, it's because of the way we're raised. Ever since we're little girls, all these expectations about how you're supposed to look. And now there are all these Instagram models, and there are all these,
I know, it's worse than ever, right?
It's getting worse than ever. And it's so hard to be body positive. And I think something that's really helped me initially was I would wake up, I said, okay, listen, I know you're not feeling great. This is the body you have for the next 24 hours. There's nothing radically you can do in the next 24 hours to make you look any different. So I just want to love, accept, and take really good care of the body I have today.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely.
And then I started appreciating my body. Then I started thanking my body and all the stuff it was doing. And when I started learning more about my health challenges and what my body was trying to tell me, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you.
Yes.
So I started apologizing to my body. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I put you through so much. Kept pushing you. And I just felt so, I mean, not to put blame, but I just felt bad that I didn't know. And I also, when you're talking about the mother anger, I also went through some of that because my mother is such an intuitive woman and intuitive with her body. And she never taught me that. Instead, like, she was so worried I would gain weight because my father's mother is overweight. And
Mm-hmm.
she thought I have like her genes. So she would
Yeah.
take preventative measures, and
Oh,
she
no.
put me on diets and
As a little
as
kid.
a little kid, and I wasn't even chubby. And that I started developing this obsession with food
Of
and
course.
seeking food.
Of course.
And then I was shamed for doing that. And it was just this constant, and I didn't know how to deal with my emotions because I wasn't allowed to feel sad because
That's
that meant
right.
I'm ungrateful.
There
And
you
so
go.
it's just
There
this
you
like
go.
pattern. You see
Yeah.
where I'm going with this, right? I actually had to have a talk with my mother, and I felt like it was part of my healing that I know you were trying to do the best you could do. I
Mm-hmm.
know you were doing it out of love, but this is how it made me
Of
feel.
course.
And at first she was a little resistant to it.
Right.
But then she was like, I'm really sorry. I didn't really know. And when I realized that she truly didn't know, and that was really healing for our relationship and for both of us.
Yeah,
And I think
definitely.
all of these things are really important, and being loving towards our bodies and appreciating it for all that it does and not just how it looks. And then you start even seeing it differently. And I think some people might be listening to this and thinking, well, does that mean I just have to like just accept what is and be lazy? But no, when you
No.
love and accept yourself, you want to take better care of yourself. You want to eat better. You start paying attention to how food makes you feel, to how everything you do makes you feel, people you meet, how they make you feel. And it just becomes so in tune with that. And it's just such a precious gift that we're not taught to connect with.
That's right. That's right. The emotional freedom technique, tapping. There's a lot of science to support this, but the first thing you do with any tapping session, is you just tap on the karate point on your hand, and you go, even though I'm disappointed at the moment with my body, I love and accept myself right now. Even though my body feels like it's betraying me, I love and accept myself right now. And then, of course, then you go up to the top of your head, and the whole thing. But it's interesting to me. It always begins with, no matter what is going on, I love and accept myself right now. Yeah.
And my body.
And my body. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I think the other part of loving and accepting ourselves is to accept that it's okay to have needs. And I think as women,
I was at a workshop in Hawaii, and they did this exercise. It was a revelation for me. Okay. It was based on nonviolent communication. And if you go to the Center for Nonviolent Communication online, there's a needs inventory, there's an emotions inventory, and a needs inventory. Well, I learned every emotion is simply trying to get a need met. That's all they're for. It's an emotional guidance system trying to get a need met. So we had on pieces of paper all of the emotions: angry, tired, frustrated, all the emotions. Then in another pile, we had the needs: food, sleep, affirmation,
rest,
rest is
hydration,
huge, all of it. So each of us would tell a story. And then two people, so it was groups of three. And then one person would listen to your story and say, are you needing? And they would just put the need thing down as you were talking. The relief in my body. Oh my God. I actually get to have a need. It was a revelation for me, because what I had learned was, especially in medical training, surgical training, you are not allowed to have needs. What you're allowed to do is do whatever is necessary to overextend yourself and be all things to all people, and God forbid, never make a mistake. Yeah, we learned that, but we never learned it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel sadness. It's okay to be tired. Yeah, needs.
And I think as women, we're so used to taking care of other people, and other people are allowed to have needs apparently, but we feel guilty, or we feel like there's something wrong and it's selfish for us to take care of a need that we do.
I just had a friend. This is unbelievable. So she just had a total knee done, and she's married to a guy who has for some reason. Never had to take care of anyone in his life. No children, all of that. So she just had major surgery. And she's in the other room and he's given her some fish. And she asks him to go to the refrigerator and get a lemon for the fish. And he comes back and says, "You are so selfish."
Oh, wow.
You are so, she's like, stunned. I'm just thinking about this because way back. Someone told me that before I do a speaking engagement, I should have a personal needs rider, like what I needed, right? I'd like some water in the hotel room when I get there. Well, one of my other needs is a bathtub. When I was doing these big PBS tours and all, I just need to put myself in water. Well, the first time we ever sent the personal needs rider to a hospital in Long Island, this was where I was going to give the speaking engagement, the guy called Diane, my assistant, who I've worked with forever, and berated her, yelled at her. Who does she think she is? What kind of a prima donna is this? All we'd ask for was a bathtub and some water in the room. Yeah. So when a woman feels like she can't get her needs met, it's not okay. She's actually dealing with what Rupert Sheldrake would call the morphogenic field of women are not supposed to have needs, women are supposed to serve me, or the feminine, because anyone who has primarily feminine, nurturing, caring energy is in the same boat, whether they're male, female, transgender, doesn't matter. It's whoever is the most nurturing, caring is the one who's not supposed to have needs. And Anne Schaaf used to say, workaholism is the addiction of choice for those who feel unworthy. Well, and then she also said the original sin of being born female is not redeemable by works. So do you see the catch-22 there? You work to prove that you're worthy, but you're feminine or you're coming from the feminine side. So no matter what you do, it's never going to be enough. Yeah. That's the catch-22. So you have to decide, and I think that this is very empowering. What you find is you have to just state, this is what I need. No one else is going to do it for you. I used to watch shifts of nurses come and go when I'd be on call for a weekend. There would be 6 shifts of nurses. And they'd say to each other, have you had your break? Have you had your lunch? Nobody was saying that to me. I was just expected to be there taking care of everything for the entire weekend. And I remember thinking, who's going to ask me? You keep waiting for someone to ask you, do you need to rest? Would you like a break? You have to be the one who takes it. Nobody is going to give it to you. Nobody. And when you do it, and I'm sure you've done it, and I've done it, the minute you do it, the entire outer world changes. Oh my God. Here's somebody who takes care of herself. And you start to get treated differently. And you start to live your life differently. Yeah. Yeah. It's a big turning point.
Because we teach people how to treat us.
That's it.
Yeah.
We do.
Through our own behaviors and how we treat ourselves.
That's right.
I was turning 30 and I asked my grandmother, what did you do for fun? I was thinking I need to do this like big I'm turning 30. Yeah. And I was like, what did my grandmother do when she was 30? And she's like, my daughter got married because she was a child bride. So
wow.
So I was like, okay, well,
my daughter got married when she was 30.
I got a son-in-law. Like, that's what she said. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. I am not even married myself. So, and then I said, so Grandma, what did you ever do to take care of yourself? And she's like, what do you mean? I said, what would you do to take care of you? She's like, after I was done cleaning the kitchen and doing all the dishes and washing all the clothes, and I would stay up until 2 a.m. I would, kind of sing for myself, or I would brush my hair. And like, she had to wait until 2 a.m. when everyone was asleep for her to feel like she needs to do something. And, and then I asked her, so Grandma, like, what did you ever do for fun? She said, what do you mean? I said, like, what did you do for when you weren't doing anything? She's like, I was always doing something. I said, well, what about when you were on a trip and you're in the car and you're on a road trip? Like, what were you doing? What were you thinking about? She's like, I was knitting winter clothes.
That's right. That's right.
So like,
never even occurred. No, it never even occurred. And I think one of the reasons why it's harder almost in a way, like in the 50s, That's what women did. They stayed home. After World War II in the United States, anyway, they stayed home and they were supposed to be homemakers. And it didn't matter if you had riveted a B-52 bomber. None of that mattered that you had all those skills. You were supposed to be home. Okay. Then the 60s happened and the civil rights movement and the feminist movement, and people began to realize, whoa, maybe I don't have to just be my mother. But now, and you talked about it with the Instagram models and all that, now you're supposed to be married, have beautiful children, look amazing, and have a big social media profile.
And have an amazing career.
And have an amazing career. Like anyone could put that together. I don't even remember when my kids were little. I remember looking at the pictures. They were cute. I don't remember myself, what I was doing, except working and trying to survive with 2 little kids.
And I think really when we start listening to that inner guide, we start designing our lives differently, and we start asking for different changes, like even in our organizations and our career options. And that's where the real empowerment really comes in. And I talk about this in other episodes as well, about how we've been living in a world designed and built by men for men. As an exercise, let's think about what a woman-designed world would look like. I mean, I saw a study earlier about how even office temperatures are geared towards male bodies.
Yes. Yeah, they're too cold. Yeah, they're too cold.
And when we connect with those needs and we start loving ourselves and also loving the processes of our bodies, like what if we all celebrated when we got our periods instead of being like, ugh, I got my period. And and I used to be one of those people. And now I'm like, oh my God, thank God my body's doing its thing.
I know, it's so
what do you
magic.
need today? How can I take better care of you? Oh, what are you craving? You know, and I'm like the other day, I was like, I really want chocolate. I was like, oh, I need magnesium. Maybe I need some folate. Maybe I need some iron. I need these nutrients in me. So, or I need a little more extra rest, or being able to ask the boss, like, you know, I want to work from home today. I got my period, and be able to do that instead of being ashamed, and instead of women's bodies being flawed and needing extra maintenance and extra care. And it's celebrating really all that it does and all that it is. And it comes from that love and that connecting with those needs and learning how to get them met. And it is really a process and a journey.
Yeah, I remember the early feminism. So let's say, the second wave, maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s of feminism. And the feminism of that time was very masculine. So, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. There were many women, still are, who felt that the pinnacle of having arrived was to exercise enough so that they no longer had a period. So, in other words, the goal was to become a man. We had the big shoulder pads in the 80s, the dress for success. So the messages were always this: be a man. That's success. Don't let them see you sweat. Don't ever cry. Don't ever admit that you're even having a period. Let's just be a man. That was feminism in the 70s. And so when I came in with Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom and invented a language of women's health for the uterus, for the cervix, for the vagina, for the breast, an actual language of health, because in medicine, those areas are just, like waiting for disease. So they're taught as there's no room in the tomb for the womb. So we should be taking it out as soon as possible because it's for babies or cancer. So I had to teach that it was the processes of the female body that were metaphors for how creation comes into physical matter, for how creative energy comes into matter. These were the processes that mirrored that, and therefore they need to be paid attention to. They were part of your magic. They weren't something to be gotten rid of as a feminist.
What you just said reminded me of, when I work as an advisor for women in leadership, I often find that women who are new to leadership positions, especially if they are in a male-dominated field or if they haven't seen other women leaders in action, they tend to adopt a lot of masculine traits.
Yes.
And try to behave like their other male leaders that they've seen before them. And, I try to help them first realize this and also help them connect with themselves and create their own sort of authentic and powerful leadership style that honors who they truly are. And it really differs from woman to woman, even.
Yeah.
from a woman's health perspective, like, why is it so important for women to embrace being authentic to who they are, whether that may be having genuine, so quote unquote, feminine or even masculine traits?
That's true. That's really true. No, Dolly Parton said this years ago, find out who you are and do it on purpose. So I have a very young masculine approach. Like, get it done. This is what needs to be done. Let's do your job. Very, very young. And it's very useful. It's very, very useful in the world the way it is. And if someone is a more yin, then it's better, actually. I mean, I used to say years ago, because I knew that I could have been head of the department in the hospital here. Easy. I could have been chief of the department of OBGYN at one of the hospitals here at the age of 34. I remember it. I was a full partner in my practice. I had a company car. I had a pension plan. I turned around and I said, this is it? Like, this is what the guys have been striving for? This is the pinnacle? Oh, come on. There needs to be more than this. So what you want to do is then figure out what your skill set is. And if it comes from deep inside, it will be authentic and it will bear fruit. But if you're always trying to be someone you're not, it will always cause excess stress hormones and eventually you will get sick. Yeah. So you have to find out who you are, do it on purpose. Some people do way better with a job, with a schedule, with a boss telling you what to do. It's just better. Nothing wrong with that. I see now, again, it's one of those new bars that one must measure up to for women. You must have your own business. What if you don't want to do all that?
Exactly.
What if you want to be done by 5? Because if you have your own business, you are never done. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. There's always. So I think you need to find out where you are. But most of the corporate jobs in this country right now and probably around the world are based on a male model. Now, Hay House everyone has a 3-day weekend. So Fridays are off. And so that is a reasonable job for many people because they start a little earlier and a little later, but everyone gets a 3-day weekend. So they get their life. Another friend of mine is a reporter. She gets 6 months of paid maternity leave. So things are changing. But frankly, nobody that I can tell in the United States has figured out the childcare situation. Nobody. It is still big of an issue now as it ever was when my kids were born, and they're in their 30s now. This is crazy. We don't know how to do this. Now, in World War II, they did. When we were winning the war effort and women were in factories, the government, overnight, by the way, created well-lit, beautiful childcare centers. And when the women would finish their shift and pick up their child, they were met with a full dinner to take home.
Wow.
The government did that. Why? Because the war effort, so patriarchy can be defined as a country or a belief system or a culture that is either going to war or recovering from war. So when we all decide, oh my God, there's a common enemy, we got to go kill people, then we can create childcare and get the women working. Now what we need to have is the same zeal to produce peace and prosperity for everyone so that women, women and girls, huge untapped resource. I mean, Christophe and Woodon's book, Half the Sky. Women and girls are not the problem, they're the solution. But we have to figure out the childcare situation. Because no woman like you or me, frankly, should be home with a 2-year-old all day. There's no tribe in any of the world where that's ever happened, where a person's supposed to be home alone with a 2-year-old, with a baby. There's always been communal childcare. The whole family takes care of the children. We haven't, in industrialized society, we haven't figured that one out. And until we do, like there's individual people who figured it out. My daughter has fantastic daycare here in this town. Why? Because one of my contemporaries years ago Midge Vreeland is her name. She's currently in another form. She died. But Midge had a big advertising agency. And she said, I need daycare. And she set one up. And it's been wonderful from that moment on. So society needs to figure this out, because as long as childcare is primarily a woman's job, we're never going to get anywhere. Never.
But I think this really goes back into connecting with our needs and
Yes.
we need better childcare systems. We do not want to settle for what exists right now.
No.
We want to be able to enjoy our evenings with our children. We want to, I mean, I don't have children, but I'm speaking for,
of
on
course,
behalf of other women. Maybe I shouldn't, but it needs to be better, and we need to connect to our needs. And it's okay for us to want to have careers too. And it's okay to want to try to, and to struggle with that. But we need to find better solutions to balance all this so we can have better physical health and better mental health. So we're not always under stress and with the cortisol going all over the place. And childcare and a woman being under less stress and our family being under less stress over childcare can really impact the family's health and well-being.
Huge. Well, my daughter just wrote a book called Do Less. And it's about how you can get more done in a lot less time if you just do less. It's a wonderful book about myths of productivity. Myths of, as that's your field, obviously.
Yeah, and being overly busy and being overly connected. I mean, these days we're so connected, but we're also so disconnected.
That's right.
Especially from ourselves and our needs and our bodies. And I want to thank you so much for everything you're doing to empower women and empower individuals to really connect with their bodies and trust their inner guides. But before we wrap up, I want to ask a little bit about your journey as well. And you touched on this slightly, but I often encounter individuals who are really frustrated in their careers and with their industries. And because we're so programmed to pursue opportunities that are in line with our resumes, and not necessarily, and discount, what our hearts and what our souls are really, really yearn for. And you seem to have navigated these waters when you transitioned from being an OBGYN and seeing patients one-on-one to really following your heart, to becoming someone who promotes creating health. And could you share a little bit about your journey and what led you to shift gears, and do you have any regrets?
Yes. Okay. That's just a wonderful question. So I finished college. I had some scholarship money. I intended to be, if I hadn't had the scholarship money, I don't know what I would have done, but I worked typing invoices at my boyfriend's father's office furniture company after college and realized I will get so depressed I will die. So then I thought, okay, I got to go to graduate school. So I called up my advisor from college and asked him if would he write a letter of recommendation for me to get into a teaching program in biology. I always wanted to be a biology teacher. Notice we are sitting in a 100-year-old schoolhouse, so I am now a biology teacher. Anyway, he said, why don't you go to medical school? And I thought, okay, that's a better degree. I had been interviewing in places to get a master's in biology, and it was clear they only wanted PhDs in biology, and I didn't want to do that. And he said, so why don't you do medical school? My father said, and his brother and sister are both medical doctors, whose lifestyle looked awful to me. And he said, at the end of 4 years, you got to be something. You might as well have an MD after your name. And I thought, oh, why not? Okay, so I go to Dartmouth Medical School. I'd always wanted to go to Dartmouth. They weren't accepting women at the time I was an undergraduate. And I never thought I would practice. So I did the 3-year program year-round for 3 years, saw a baby born, started to weep. Knew that OBGYN was kind of it. My husband was a surgical intern. He was going to go to Boston to become an orthopedic surgeon. We met in August, decided to be married in September because of the match. They have this thing called the match where, you're computer matched all over the country. And if we were going to be together, we needed to be married because otherwise, oh, this is my boyfriend. That's not going to work. With the head of departments, they're very serious. Anyway, so I went after interviewing 12 places in family medicine, I realized OBGYN was it. I was like breathing. So then we managed to both get postgraduate training in Boston, Tufts New England Medical Center. So I did my residency there. He did his orthopedic surgery residency there. I came to Maine, met Diane, my very first nurse. It was my first experience of a woman taking care of me. She was so organized and and so I'd come to Maine every other week for a day because the men needed to be sure I could do the job. So I was being vetted out, and they said to me, well, the women in Maine only want to see men. They don't want to see women as a doctor. Well, that proved false. And then I came up here and I started my practice, had my first baby. And then I wanted to had my second child, and I wanted to take 2 hours off on a Monday, come in at 10 in the morning, because I didn't know how I was going to keep the ball rolling with these two kids. And the head of my practice said, well, you can do that, but we'll have to cut your pay by 50%. And I was keeping everyone out of the operating room. I was the rainmaker of the practice. I brought in more new patients than anybody and then distributed them to my colleagues who did colposcopy and fertility, all of that. Loved these guys. And I went to the company attorney and I said, we've got to figure out a way to economically make my contribution a dollars and cents contribution here on the productivity list. And he looks at me and says, you're just going to have to do more surgery. And I thought, I cannot stick a laparoscope in every woman with a menstrual cramp like the rest of you guys to make money. I can't do it. I am keeping women out of the operating room with nutrition and so on, because I met Michio Kushi right after my residency in Boston. And I began to sit with him while he did consultations with macrobiotics. And I saw what diet could do to people. And these were people who were sent home to die with big charts with cancer and all of that stuff. So anyway, I realized, okay, I can't stay here. And about the same time, my colleague, Ellen, had to go out with a hip problem. And when she was out, she made a cartoon of a cemetery. Here lies MEF. And then she'd put our productivity sheets. Office visit initial 15,920. New OB 5,000. Blah, blah, blah. Like at the end of your life, on your tombstone would be how many surgeries you did, how many people you saw. And it was like, there's got to be something more than this. And so we all got together and then we started Women to Women. I had a vision really of where do women feel comfortable? Home. Let's start a practice in a home. Let's make the bedrooms the exam rooms. And so we set up this, beautiful old mansion. And then we started Women to Women, which was a beacon of women's health care for about 20 years. People came from all over the world for this holistic approach, but mostly what women would do. See, because I began to see, this was in the pre-Harvey Weinstein area, women with pelvic pain would tell me about being sexually abused. My colleagues all thought that they were crazy. They'd say, we only see normal women. You see the crazy women. And I was always helping women see what the pattern was that led to the thing so that they would be empowered. And then I started a newsletter with Phillips Publishing International. No, I first wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. That took a long time to write. None of the publishing houses knew what it was about. I'll never forget, I'm at the Bertelsmann Building in the middle of New York City, Times Square. And the head of publicity goes, how are we going to sell this book? I don't even know what it's about. I said, this book is a prayer and the angels will sell it. And they did. Not even my literary agent believed in it. No one believed in it. But women believed in it because they'd read it and they would say, I knew this. See, you read the book and it awakens your own inner wisdom. It's not me saying, oh, I'm the big guru, do this. No, it's the woman saying, this makes sense to me, but I never heard a doctor say it. So I built a bridge. Yeah. So then after that, I started a newsletter and eventually left the one-on-one practice because I was lecturing more. And one day, this guy calls me out of the blue, Jack Wilson, and he says, my wife kept saying, you need to do a TV show with public television. Jack was a public television producer in Chicago. So he hears a lecture that I did at the Chautauqua Institute as he's driving. I didn't even know they were recording that lecture. So he calls me. That starts the television career. Then I got on Oprah 10 times because of Oprah's The Book Falling Off the Thing. I did 8 public television specials. I did 10 appearances on Oprah. Then I wrote a bunch more books, The Wisdom of Menopause, because I went through menopause, went through a divorce, saw what it was all about, and said, oh my God, this is what this is about. This isn't just about hormones. This is about, your life, right? Then I left Women to Women. It's like every step of the way has been a leap of faith and being willing to pivot when it looks like this is a time. So I'm in that time right now. I can feel it. There's another pivot because I finally met my life partner. So now it's about us. So that's the fulfillment of my lifelong dream that drove me to write Goddesses Never Age and all of the rest of it. So what I've done, and this was what everyone needs to do, you take your life circumstances, like what is in the way is the way. You work with it. You take the irritants, you take the stuff that breaks your heart, you take all the stuff that isn't working, and like a pearl, like an oyster, pearlizing a grain of sand, a process called perturbation, you make a pearl. You make a pearl out of the things that break your heart, irritate you, aren't working, and then you step by step see what you can create.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're so welcome.
This has been such a treat. Honestly, just even sitting with you has been a healing experience for me.
Great
It's been nourishing for my soul. So thank you so much for making the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're so welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Maliheh Paryavi podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter and subscribe to my newsletter on my website for more inspiration and support. Until next time, be well and keep on shining.